The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in April 1882, and Nathan Pierce knew, before he even opened it, that his life was about to change forever in ways he could not yet imagine. He stood on the weathered porch of his ranch house outside Concordia, Kansas, holding the thin paper with hands that had grown rough from years of working cattle and mending fences alone. The words were brief, almost impersonal, but they struck something deep in his chest that had been dormant for far too long. She was coming. The woman who had answered his carefully worded advertisement in the Boston newspaper would arrive on the Thursday train with all her worldly possessions. Her name was Beatrice Sullivan, and she was prepared to become his wife if he found her suitable. Nathan was 32 years old, tall and lean with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he forgot to trim it. His face had been weathered by the Kansas sun and wind, lines forming at the corners of his blue eyes from squinting across endless prairie. He had built this ranch from nothing after the war, working harder than any man should have to work, and now he had a decent house, good grazing land, and a herd of cattle that would support a family. What he did not have was the family itself. The loneliness had crept up on him slowly, like frost forming on a window. At first, the work had been enough. Building, branding, buying more land when he could afford it. But lately, when he rode back to the empty house at sunset and cooked a solitary meal, the silence pressed against him like a physical weight. He was not a man given to self-pity, but he recognized when something essential was missing from his life. So he had done what many men in his position did. He had placed an advertisement seeking a wife. The responses had surprised him. He had expected perhaps 1 or 2 letters from desperate women with no other options. Instead, he received nearly a dozen, each telling a different story of hardship or adventure or simply the desire for a new beginning. Beatrice Sullivan's letter had stood out not because it was the most eloquent or the most desperate, but because it was honest. She wrote plainly about her circumstances, about her work as a seamstress in Boston, about her desire for a different life than the one the city offered. She did not make promises she could not keep or paint herself as something she was not. She seemed real in a way the other letters did not. They had exchanged 3 more letters after that first one. Nathan told her about the ranch, about Concordia and its small but growing community, about the land and the sky and the work that filled his days. She told him more about herself, about losing her parents to illness, about the small apartment where she lived and sewed dresses for women who barely looked at her. With each letter, Nathan felt something growing in him that might have been hope. Now she was coming, and he found himself nervous in a way he had not been since his first cattle drive as a young man. Thursday morning arrived with a brilliant blue sky and a warm breeze that promised summer was not far off. Nathan had spent the previous day cleaning the house more thoroughly than he ever had before, washing windows and sweeping floors and even putting fresh linens on the bed in the spare room. He assumed she would want her own space until they were properly married. He was not the kind of man who would force anything on a woman, especially one who had traveled halfway across the country to meet a stranger. He hitched his wagon and drove the 8 miles into Concordia, arriving at the train station a full hour before the scheduled time. The town was bustling with its usual activity. Merchants swept their storefronts, women carried baskets of goods from the general store, and children ran through the streets with the boundless energy of youth. Nathan nodded to a few people he knew but did not stop to talk. His stomach was twisted with anticipation. When the train finally pulled into the station with a great hiss of steam and screech of brakes, Nathan stood on the platform with his hat in his hands, watching as passengers began to disembark. He saw a family with several children, An older gentleman with a cane, two young men who looked like they might be heading west to seek their fortunes. And then he saw her. Beatrice Sullivan was not what he had expected, though he could not have said exactly what he had expected. She was perhaps 25 or 26, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun and green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple gray traveling dress that showed the skill of her seamstress work in its neat seams and careful fit. She was neither tall nor short, neither beautiful in the classical sense nor plain, but there was something about her face that made him want to keep looking at it. A strength, perhaps, or a determination that showed in the set of her jaw. But it was not Beatrice who made Nathan's breath catch in his throat. It was the child she held by the hand, a little girl, no more than 3 or 4 years old, with dark curls and enormous brown eyes that stared up at Nathan with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. She wore a small dress that matched the style of Beatrice's, clearly made by the same skilled hands, and she clutched a worn cloth doll against her chest. Beatrice's eyes found Nathan's across the platform, and he saw her take a deep breath before she approached him. Her expression was guarded, prepared for rejection. "Mr. Pierce?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension Nathan could see in her shoulders. "Yes, madam," he replied, putting his hat back on. "Miss Sullivan, I presume." "Mrs. Sullivan," she corrected gently, and Nathan felt something shift in his understanding. "I am a widow. I should have mentioned that in my letters, but I was afraid you would not want me if you knew." Nathan looked down at the little girl again. The child was watching him with those serious eyes, and he felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not anger at the deception, as Beatrice clearly expected, but something softer. "And this would be your daughter?" he asked. Beatrice's hand tightened on the girl's shoulder. "This is Emma. She is my responsibility, and if you cannot accept her, then I will take the next train back to Boston. I will not leave her, and I will not pretend she does not exist." The defiance in her voice told Nathan this was not the first time she had faced this situation. He wondered how many opportunities she had lost because of the child, how many doors had been closed to her because she came as a pair rather than alone. "I did not ask you to leave her," Nathan said quietly. He crouched down so he was at eye level with Emma. "Hello there, Miss Emma. My name is Nathan. That is a very fine doll you have. Does she have a name?" Emma looked up at Beatrice, who gave her an encouraging nod. The child's voice was so soft Nathan had to strain to hear it. "Molly." "Molly is a good name for a doll," Nathan said. He stood up and met Beatrice's eyes. "Let me get your bags and we will head out to the ranch. We can talk more on the way." The relief that flooded Beatrice's face was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," she whispered. As Nathan loaded 2 battered trunks and a carpet bag into the back of the wagon, he was aware of eyes watching them from the platform and the street. Concordia was a small town, and everyone knew Nathan Pierce had gone to meet his mail-order bride. By evening, everyone would also know that she had arrived with a child in tow. He helped Beatrice and Emma up onto the wagon seat, and then climbed up himself, taking the reins. The ride back to the ranch took them through the heart of town, and Nathan could feel the stares and hear the whispers that followed them. "That is not her child," Nathan heard Mrs. Henderson say loudly enough to be heard. "Look at that dark hair on the girl, nothing like the mother at all." "Probably some charity case she took on," another woman replied. "Or worse. You know what they say about women in the cities." Beatrice's face remained composed, but Nathan saw the way her jaw tightened and her hands clasped together in her lap. Emma pressed closer to her side, clearly picking up on the tension even if she did not understand the words. Nathan clicked his tongue at the horses and guided them out of town without responding to the gossip. Once they were on the open road with prairies stretching out on either side, he finally spoke. "People here talk," he said. "They do not have enough to occupy themselves, so they make entertainment out of other folks' business. Best to ignore it." "I am used to people talking," Beatrice said. Her voice was tired. "In Boston, the other women at the boarding house said terrible things. That I had stolen Emma, or that she was some illegitimate child I was trying to pass off as respectable. The truth is simpler and sadder than any of their stories." Nathan waited, letting the silence stretch between them. He had learned long ago that people would tell you what they needed to tell you if you gave them space to do it. After a long moment, Beatrice continued. "My husband died 2 years ago, typhoid. We had only been married for 8 months. Her voice was steady, but Nathan heard the old grief underneath it. "Before he died, he made me promise to look after his sister's child. His sister had died giving birth to Emma, and her husband had been killed in an accident shortly before that. Emma had no one else, so I kept my promise. I have raised her as my own, loved her as my own. But to the world, she is not mine. The coloring is different, the features are different. People see what they want to see, and what they want to see is scandal." "What do you see when you look at her?" Nathan asked. Beatrice turned to look at Emma, and her expression softened in a way that transformed her face. "I see my daughter, the child of my heart, if not my body. I see the reason I kept going after William died, the reason I learned to sew better than I ever had before, the reason I had to find a better life than what Boston could offer us." Nathan nodded slowly. "Then that is all that matters." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon rocking gently over the rutted road. Emma had relaxed slightly, her head leaning against Beatrice's arm. The child's eyes were heavy with exhaustion from the long journey. "Why did you not ask?" Beatrice said suddenly. "When you saw her, why did you not demand to know whose child she really was?" Nathan thought about that. "I suppose because it did not seem like the right question. You are here because you want a new life, and she is part of that life. I put out that advertisement because I was lonely and tired of being alone. If I turn away a woman and child who need a home just because of what other people might say, then I am a smaller man than I thought I was." He felt Beatrice looking at him, studying his face in profile as he drove. "You are not what I expected, Mr. Pierce, Nathan," he corrected. "And what did you expect?" "I do not know," she admitted. "Someone harder, perhaps, more concerned with appearances. Most men I have encountered would not be so accepting." "I am not most men," Nathan said simply. "And out here, we do things differently. The land is hard and life is harder. People who survive learn not to judge too quickly or too harshly." As they crested a small rise, the ranch came into view. It was not much compared to some of the larger spreads in the area, but Nathan was proud of what he had built. The house was sturdy, built from lumber he had hauled from town himself, with a wide porch and a shingled roof that did not leak. There was a barn for the horses, a corral for the cattle, and a chicken coop that provided fresh eggs. A windmill creaked in the breeze, pumping water into a trough. "It is beautiful," Beatrice said, and Nathan heard the genuine appreciation in her voice. "I have never lived anywhere with so much space around it. In Boston, the buildings press in on all sides. Here you can see forever." "Gets lonely sometimes," Nathan admitted, "but it has its compensations. Emma, are you awake? We are home." The little girl lifted her head, blinking sleepily. When she saw the ranch house, her eyes widened. "We live here, if you want to," Nathan said. "There is plenty of room for everyone." He pulled the wagon up to the house and helped Beatrice and Emma down. As he carried the trunks inside, he watched Beatrice look around with an assessing eye. The house was clean but sparse, furnished with only what was necessary. A table and chairs, a stove, a few cabinets, and a rocking chair by the fireplace that Nathan had bought on impulse one day and rarely used. "The bedroom at the end of the hall is yours," Nathan said, nodding toward the hallway. "There is a bed and a dresser, and I put fresh linens on it yesterday. You and Emma can settle in there. I will take the small room off the kitchen." Beatrice turned to him, surprise evident on her face. "That is your room. I cannot displace you from your own bed." "The other room is bigger," Nathan said. "You will need the space for Emma. Besides, I do not need much. I am up before dawn most days and do not come in until after dark. I will be fine where I am." He could see her weighing whether to argue further, but exhaustion won out. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You have been very kind to us." "Just practical," Nathan said, though he knew it was more than that. There was something about these two, the weary woman and the solemn child, that had already begun to work their way past his defenses. That first evening set the pattern for the days that followed. Nathan showed Beatrice around the ranch, explaining the daily routines and the work that needed to be done. She listened carefully, asking intelligent questions and clearly assessing how she could contribute. Emma stayed close to Beatrice's side, watching everything with those serious eyes but rarely speaking. On the second day, Nathan came in from checking the north fence line to find the house transformed. Beatrice had unpacked their belongings, and small touches of domesticity had appeared everywhere. A cloth on the table, curtains in the windows that she must have brought with her or made during the journey, and the smell of bread baking in the oven. Emma was sitting on the floor near the stove, playing with her doll and talking to it in a soft voice. "I hope you do not mind," Beatrice said when she saw him looking around. "I could not help but make some changes. This place needed a woman's touch." "I do not mind at all," Nathan said honestly. "It already feels more like a home." They fell into an easy routine over the next few weeks. Nathan worked the ranch, rising before dawn to tend to the animals and ride out to check on the cattle. Beatrice managed the house with quiet efficiency, cooking meals that were far better than anything Nathan had made for himself, tending the kitchen garden he had neglected, and caring for Emma. The little girl began to relax in the safety of the ranch, her smiles coming more frequently, though she still rarely spoke above a whisper. Nathan found himself looking forward to the end of each day, when he could come back to the house and find Beatrice and Emma there waiting. Dinner became a time for conversation, with Beatrice telling stories about Boston and her work as a seamstress, and Nathan sharing tales of the ranch and the land. Emma would listen, her eyes moving back and forth between them as if trying to understand the new world she had entered. The people of Concordia had their opinions, of course. When Nathan took Beatrice and Emma into town for supplies 3 weeks after their arrival, he could feel the judgment radiating from certain quarters. Mrs. Henderson made a point of crossing the street to avoid them. Reverend Thomas looked at them with obvious disapproval from the church steps. But there were others who were kinder. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the general store, greeted them warmly and slipped Emma a peppermint stick with a wink. Old Tom Waverly, who had been in Concordia since before Kansas was even a state, tipped his hat to Beatrice and told Nathan he was a lucky man. "Do not let the biddies get to you," Tom said in his gravelly voice. "Half of them are just jealous because their own husbands are not worth a plugged nickel. You got yourself a good woman there, Pierce. Anyone with eyes can see it." Nathan appreciated the support, but he could see the toll the gossip was taking on Beatrice. She held her head high in town, never showing weakness, but back at the ranch, he would sometimes catch her staring out the window with a troubled expression. It was late May, nearly 6 weeks after Beatrice's arrival, when things came to a head. Nathan had taken Emma out to see the new calves that morning, leaving Beatrice to work on some mending. The little girl had been excited, chattering more than he had ever heard her chatter, pointing at the gangly-legged babies and laughing when one came up to sniff her hand. When they returned to the house, they found Beatrice sitting at the table with 3 women from town. Nathan recognized them immediately. Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Pritchard, and Mrs. Coleman, 3 of the most prominent gossips in Concordia. The air in the kitchen was thick with tension. "Mr. Pierce," Mrs. Henderson said, standing up with a rustle of skirts, "we were just speaking with your, shall we say, companion about the unusual situation here." Nathan felt his jaw tighten. He glanced at Beatrice, whose face was carefully neutral, though he could see the color high on her cheeks. Emma had gone very still beside him, sensing the danger in the room. "What situation would that be?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice level. "Well, the child, of course, Mrs. Pritchard said, as if it should be obvious. "Everyone can see she is not truly this woman's daughter. The coloring is all wrong, the features are different. We have a responsibility to the community to ensure that children are being properly cared for and that there is no, shall we say, impropriety occurring." Nathan felt a cold anger rising in him, the kind that was more dangerous for being controlled. "I am not sure I understand what you are implying, madam. Perhaps you should speak more plainly." Mrs. Henderson took over, her voice dripping with false concern. "We are simply worried about the child's welfare, Mr. Pierce. If she has been taken from her rightful family, or if her presence here is the result of some, shall we say, unfortunate circumstance, then it is our Christian duty to intervene. And of course, there is the matter of your own reputation to consider. Living here with a woman you are not married to, and a child of questionable origin, well, it does not look good for any of you." Nathan looked down at Emma, who had pressed herself against his leg, her small hand gripping his pants. Then he looked at Beatrice, whose eyes met his with a mixture of defiance and exhaustion. In that moment, he made a decision that felt as natural as breathing. "You are quite right, Mrs. Henderson," he said, and watched surprise flicker across the women's faces. "The situation is not proper as it stands. That is why Beatrice and I will be getting married as soon as Reverend Thomas can perform the ceremony. This Sunday, if he is available." The silence that followed was absolute. Beatrice's eyes widened and her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Emma looked up at Nathan with confusion clear on her small face. Mrs. Coleman recovered first. "Married, but you barely know each other, and the child will be my daughter," Nathan finished firmly. "Emma will be a Pierce, same as Beatrice and me. Now, I believe you ladies have said what you came to say, so I will thank you to leave my property. I have work to do and my family needs to prepare for a wedding." The 3 women had no choice but to leave, though they did so with an air of profound disapproval. As soon as the door closed behind them, Nathan turned to find Beatrice staring at him with an expression he could not read. "Why did you do that?" she asked quietly. Emma had gone to her, and Beatrice's hand rested protectively on the child's head. Nathan took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. "Because it needed to be done. We should have done it weeks ago, truth be told. I know we agreed to take our time, to see if we could make this work before making it legal, but I will not have people coming into my home and making you feel unwelcome. I will not have them questioning Emma's place here." "But marriage," Beatrice said, "that is not something to be entered into lightly, especially not as a response to gossip." Nathan pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Emma climbed into Beatrice's lap, and the woman's arms came around her automatically, holding her close. "No, it is not," Nathan agreed. "But I am not suggesting this just because of gossip. Beatrice, these past weeks have been the best I have known in a very long time. I like having you here. I like coming home to a house that feels lived in, to meals cooked by someone other than myself, to conversation that is not just me talking to the horses. I like watching Emma discover the ranch and seeing her smile when she finds something new. I like the way you hum while you work and the way you always make sure my coffee is hot in the morning. I like you. And I think, given time, I could come to love you and Emma both. Beatrice's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I like you too, she admitted. More than I expected to. You are gentle and patient, especially with Emma. You do not talk down to her or treat her like a burden. You treat her like she matters, and that means more to me than I can say. But Nathan, marriage is permanent. What if you change your mind? What if you decide that you do not want the responsibility of another man's child? Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were work roughened like his own, the hands of someone who knew what it meant to labor for a living. I will not change my mind, he said. I am 32 years old, Beatrice. I have lived through a war and built a ranch from nothing. I know my own mind and I know what I want. I want a wife and a family. If you will have me, I would be honored if you would be that wife and Emma would be my daughter, not in pretense, but in truth. Emma had been listening to this exchange with wide eyes. Now she tugged on Beatrice's sleeve. Mama, does this mean Nathan will be my papa? The word hit Nathan squarely in the chest. Mama. Emma called Beatrice Mama, and there was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty. Whatever the truth of their biological relationship in the ways that mattered, they were mother and daughter. Beatrice looked down at Emma, then back at Nathan. Is that truly what you want, to be her papa? Yes, Nathan said, and realized he had never meant anything more. That is what I want. Tears spilled over onto Beatrice's cheeks, but she was smiling. Then yes, I will marry you. We will marry you. Emma let out a little squeal of delight and scrambled down from Beatrice's lap to run around the table to Nathan. He picked her up, and she threw her small arms around his neck, hugging him with surprising strength. I get a papa, she said into his shoulder. I always wanted a papa. Nathan felt his own eyes burning and did not try to stop the emotions that swept through him. He looked at Beatrice over Emma's dark curls and saw the same feelings reflected in her face. They had come together out of practicality, two lonely people seeking a solution to their separate problems. But somewhere along the way, something real had begun to grow between them. That Sunday, as promised, they stood before Reverend Thomas in the small church in Concordia. The Reverend had been reluctant at first, clearly influenced by the gossip, but Nathan had been firm. They were getting married with or without his blessing. It was up to the Reverend whether he wanted to be part of it, or if they would have to find a judge to do the deed. The church was not full, but there were more people there than Nathan had expected. Old Tom Waverly sat in the front row with a satisfied expression on his weathered face. Mrs. Patterson and her husband were there, along with several other ranching families who had always been fair to Nathan. Even some of the townspeople who had been uncertain came out of curiosity, if nothing else. Beatrice wore a dress she had made herself from fabric Nathan had bought in town, a soft blue that brought out the green in her eyes. Emma stood beside her in a new white pinafore, holding a bouquet of wildflowers they had picked that morning. Nathan wore his one good suit, brushed clean and pressed as well as he could manage. As they spoke their vows, Nathan meant every word. He promised to honor and cherish Beatrice, to provide for her and protect her, to be a faithful husband in good times and bad. When it came time to exchange rings, he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and she did the same for him. The rings had belonged to his parents, saved all these years in a box under his bed. It felt right to use them now, to connect this new family to the one that had come before. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed Beatrice for the first time. It was a gentle kiss, respectful and chaste given their audience, but it sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the sun streaming through the church windows. This was his wife now. These two people, Beatrice and Emma, were his family. The reception was held at the Waverly Ranch, the old man having insisted on hosting it despite Nathan's protests. There was food and music, and even some of the people who had been coldest to them made an effort to be polite. Mrs. Patterson gave them a set of embroidered pillowcases as a wedding gift. The Johnsons, who owned the spread to the east, gifted them a young milk cow. Old Tom gave Emma a wooden horse he had carved himself, and the little girl clutched it to her chest with the same devotion she showed her doll Molly. As the sun began to set, Nathan and Beatrice danced under the open sky, Emma watching from Tom's lap with sleepy eyes. It was not a fancy affair, nothing like what Beatrice might have experienced in Boston, but Nathan hoped it was enough. He hoped she did not regret leaving the city for this life for him. "What are you thinking?" Beatrice asked, her head resting against his shoulder as they swayed to the music. "That I am a lucky man," Nathan said honestly, "that I should probably pinch myself to make sure this is real." Beatrice pulled back slightly to look up at him. "I am the lucky one. You could have turned us away that day at the station. Most men would have. Instead, you welcomed us, no questions asked. You gave us a home and respect, and now your name. I will not forget that, Nathan. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for it." "I do not want gratitude," Nathan said, surprising himself with the fervor in his voice. I need you to know that I care for you, Beatrice. Not out of duty or obligation, but because of who you are. You are strong and smart and kind, and you have already made my life better just by being in it. I know we have not known each other long, but I think we can build something good here, something lasting." Beatrice's eyes were luminous in the fading light. "I think so too. I already care for you more than I thought possible in such a short time. When you stood up to those women, when you said Emma would be your daughter, I felt my heart just, I do not know, open up. I thought I knew what love was, but maybe I did not. Maybe this is what it is supposed to feel like." They kissed again, longer this time with more feeling. When they broke apart, Nathan saw old Tom grinning at them from across the yard, Emma asleep against his chest. "Time to take your family home, Pierce," Tom called out. "That little one is plumb tuckered out, and you two need to start your new life proper." They drove back to the ranch under a canopy of stars, Emma sleeping between them on the wagon seat. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of grass and growing things. When they reached the house, Nathan carried Emma inside and laid her gently on the small cot Beatrice had set up in their room. The child barely stirred, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Beatrice tucked a blanket around her daughter and smoothed the dark curls back from her forehead. Nathan watched from the doorway, struck by the tenderness of the gesture. When Beatrice straightened and turned to him, there was a question in her eyes. They were married now. There were expectations, rights, and privileges that came with that, but Nathan had no intention of forcing anything. He stepped forward and took Beatrice's hands in his. "There is no rush," he said quietly, mindful of the sleeping child nearby. "We have the rest of our lives to figure this out. I just want you to be comfortable and happy. Everything else will come in time." Relief and something else, something that might have been disappointment, flickered across Beatrice's face. "You are a patient man, Nathan Pierce." "I am a man who knows the value of things worth waiting for," he replied. But as the weeks turned into months, patience became both easier and harder. Easier because they were building something real together, a partnership that extended beyond the legal bonds of marriage. Harder because with each passing day, Nathan found himself more deeply in love with his wife and the child who had become his daughter. Summer came in full force, hot and dry with storms that rolled across the prairie like freight trains. Nathan taught Emma to ride on one of the gentler horses, and Beatrice learned to help with the cattle, proving herself as capable on horseback as she was with a needle and thread. They worked side by side, building the ranch into something more prosperous than Nathan had managed alone. Emma thrived in the open air and freedom of ranch life. She grew taller and sturdier, her cheeks taking on a healthy color from the sun. She followed Nathan everywhere when he let her, chattering away now instead of whispering, asking endless questions about the animals and the land and how things worked. At night, she demanded stories from both her parents, usually falling asleep halfway through with her hand holding Molly and the wooden horse from Old Tom. The gossip in town died down, though it never fully disappeared. Mrs. Henderson and her ilk still looked at them with disapproval, but it mattered less and less. Nathan and Beatrice had each other, had Emma, had a life they were building together. The opinions of bitter old women held no power over that. It was late August when things shifted between Nathan and Beatrice. They had been married nearly 4 months, and while they shared a house and a life, they had not yet shared a bed beyond sleeping in the same room with Emma between them. Nathan had moved back into the main bedroom after the wedding, but he slept on a bedroll on the floor while Beatrice and Emma took the bed. One night, after Emma had been asleep for hours, Beatrice sat up in bed and looked down at Nathan in the moonlight streaming through the window. "This is foolish," she whispered. "You are sleeping on the floor in your own house, in your own room. It is not right." Nathan had been half asleep, but her voice brought him fully awake. "I am fine where I am." "But I am not," Beatrice said, and there was something in her voice that made Nathan's heart beat faster. "We are married, Nathan, not just on paper but truly married. And I want this to be real in every way. I want you beside me, not on the floor treating me like I am made of glass." Nathan sat up slowly. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel obligated." "Stop," Beatrice interrupted gently. "I am not feeling obligated. I am feeling like a woman whose husband is kind and patient and whom she has come to love quite desperately over these past months. I am feeling like I want our marriage to be a real one in every sense. If you want that too, that is." Nathan moved in the darkness, kneeling beside the bed so he was level with her. "I have wanted that since about the second week you were here. I have been half crazy with wanting it. But I did not want to push, did not want you to think that was all I cared about." Beatrice reached out and cupped his face in her hand. "I know what you care about. You have shown me every single day. You care about Emma and me, about making sure we feel safe and valued. You work yourself to exhaustion to provide for us. You are patient and kind and funny in ways I never expected. I love you, Nathan. I love you with everything I am." "I love you too," Nathan said, and the words felt like coming home. "I love you and Emma both. You are my family, the family I did not know how much I needed." They came together then, finally, with Emma sleeping peacefully beside them. It was tender and careful at first, both of them learning each other in this new way, but it was also right. Deeply, perfectly right. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Beatrice's head on Nathan's chest and his arm around her shoulders. Emma had shifted in her sleep to curl against Beatrice's back, and Nathan thought he had never felt so complete in his entire life. "Thank you," Beatrice whispered into the darkness. "For what? For giving us a chance. For not asking questions that day at the station. For seeing us as we are instead of as the town wanted you to see us. For loving Emma even though she is not yours by blood." Nathan tightened his arm around her. "She is mine in every way that matters. Blood does not make a family, Beatrice. Love does." Choice does. I chose you and Emma, and I would make that choice again every single day for the rest of my life." He felt Beatrice's tears on his chest and held her as she cried quietly, releasing what he suspected were months or even years of fear and uncertainty. When she finally slept, Nathan stayed awake a while longer, listening to the breathing of his wife and daughter, feeling the weight and warmth of them beside him. He thought about the man he had been before that telegram arrived, alone and not even realizing how lonely he was. That man felt like a stranger now. The seasons turned as they always did in Kansas. Autumn came with its crisp air and changing colors, and then winter arrived with snow that blanketed the prairie and made the ranch feel like the only place in the world. Nathan and Beatrice and Emma were snowed in for days at a time, but it never felt like hardship. They told stories by the fire, played games Emma invented, and grew even closer in the forced intimacy of the small house. It was during that winter that Beatrice told Nathan she was expecting. They were alone in the kitchen one morning, Emma still asleep in the next room, when Beatrice took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "There is another child coming," she said, her eyes searching his face for his reaction. "A baby, by late spring if my calculations are right." Nathan felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost knocked him over. "A baby," he repeated, "our baby." "Yes," Beatrice said, smiling now. "A brother or sister for Emma. How do you feel about that?" Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her as close as he dared. "I feel like the luckiest man alive. Again, I seem to feel that way a lot since you came here." They told Emma that evening, and the little girl was beside herself with excitement. "A baby, a real baby. Can I help take care of it, Mama? Can I teach it things?" "Of course you can," Beatrice assured her. "You will be the best big sister any baby could ask for." As winter gave way to spring and Beatrice's belly grew round with their child, Nathan found himself thinking often about the journey that had brought them all to this point. If anyone had told him a year ago that he would be married with one daughter and another child on the way, he would have thought them mad. But here he was, and he had never been happier. The baby came on a warm day in May, exactly 1 year after the confrontation with Mrs. Henderson and the other town women. Beatrice labored through the afternoon and evening with Mrs. Patterson helping, the older woman having experience with such things. Nathan paced outside the bedroom door, Emma holding his hand and looking worried. "Is Mama going to be all right?" Emma asked, her voice small and scared when Beatrice cried out. Nathan picked her up, even though she was getting too big for it, and held her close. "Your Mama is strong. She is going to be just fine, and when this is over, we will have a new baby to meet." When the baby's first cry finally rang through the house, Nathan felt his knees go weak with relief. Mrs. Patterson opened the door with a broad smile on her face. "You have a son, Mr. Pierce. A fine, healthy boy, and your wife did beautifully." Nathan and Emma rushed into the room to find Beatrice propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. When Nathan sat beside her on the bed, she pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "Our son," she said softly. "What should we name him?" Nathan looked down at the baby, this new life they had created together, and felt his heart expand even further. "William," he said, thinking of Beatrice's first husband who had made her promise to care for Emma. "William Thomas Pierce. So Emma's father is still part of our family." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy ones. "That is perfect. Emma, come meet your baby brother." Emma climbed onto the bed carefully, staring at the baby with wide, awed eyes. "He is so small," she breathed. "Hello, William. I am your big sister Emma, and I am going to teach you all kinds of things." The baby yawned, and they all laughed at the perfect timing of it. Life with a newborn was exhausting and chaotic in ways Nathan had not anticipated, but it was also filled with joy. Emma took her role as big sister seriously, always wanting to help with William, bringing him toys, and singing to him when he cried. Beatrice managed everything with a calm efficiency that Nathan marveled at, somehow keeping the house running and the baby cared for without ever seeming overwhelmed. Nathan did what he could, taking over more of the household chores so Beatrice could rest when the baby slept. He would come in from working the ranch to find William needing to be walked or changed, and he discovered that he did not mind the interrupted sleep or the demanding nature of infant care. This was his son, his family, and he would do whatever was needed. When William was 3 months old, they took him into town for the first time. Nathan expected some of the old gossip to resurface, but instead they were greeted with genuine warmth by most of the townspeople. Even Mrs. Henderson managed a stiff nod in their direction. It seemed that time and the evidence of a stable, loving family had softened even the hardest hearts. Old Tom Waverly held William with the gentle confidence of a man who had held many babies in his long life. "This is a good one," he pronounced. "Strong and healthy. You two did well." As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Nathan expanded the herd and bought more land. Beatrice's sewing skills brought in extra income as women from town began requesting her services for special dresses and alterations. Emma grew tall and capable, as comfortable on horseback as her father, helping with the cattle and learning every aspect of ranch life. William grew from a baby to a toddler to a sturdy little boy who followed his sister everywhere. When Emma was 10 and William was 4, Beatrice gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Catherine. The house was chaos after that, filled with noise and laughter and the constant activity of 4 children. Nathan built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family, and Beatrice somehow managed to keep everyone fed and clothed and loved. Emma proved invaluable as the oldest, helping with her younger siblings and showing a maturity beyond her years. She never complained about the work or the responsibility, and Nathan thought often about how lucky they had been to have her in their lives from the beginning. She was as much his daughter as William and the twins were, and he made sure she knew it. One evening when Emma was 12, she came to Nathan as he was sitting on the porch watching the sunset. She had been quiet all day, and Nathan had sensed something was troubling her. "Papa," she said, sitting down beside him. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," Nathan replied. Emma was silent for a moment, her eyes on the horizon. "Do you remember when we first came here, when Mama and I got off the train?" "I remember," Nathan said. "How could I forget? That was one of the most important days of my life. People in town used to say I was not really Mama's daughter," Emma continued, her voice steady but her hands twisting in her lap. "I heard them, even though I was little. They said awful things, but you never asked. You never made Mama prove I was hers or demanded to know where I came from. Why?" Nathan considered his answer carefully. This was important, he could feel it. "Because it did not matter. You were with your Mama and she loved you, and that was all I needed to know. The circumstances of how you came to be with her were her business, not mine. My business was deciding whether to open my home and heart to both of you, and that was an easy decision." Emma turned to look at him, and Nathan saw tears on her cheeks. "I know the truth now. Mama told me last year about Uncle William and Aunt Sarah, about how they died and how she took me in. I know I am not her blood child, but Papa, she is my Mama in every way, and you are my Papa in every way. The twins are my sisters and William is my brother. This is my family." Nathan put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "That is exactly right. Family is not just about blood, Emma. It is about love and commitment and choosing each other every single day. I chose you the day you got off that train, and I have chosen you every day since. You are my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." Emma buried her face in his shoulder and cried, and Nathan held her through it, this girl who had become a young woman who had taught him what it meant to be a father. When she finally pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "Thank you, Papa, for everything. For taking us in, for loving Mama, for making us a family." "Thank you for being my daughter," Nathan replied. "I could not be prouder of the person you are becoming." The years continued to unfold in a pattern of work and growth and love. Nathan watched his children grow, each of them unique and wonderful in their own ways. Emma became an accomplished rider and rancher, as skilled as any man twice her age. William developed a love for horses and showed a talent for training them. The twins, Sarah and Catherine, were inseparable and constantly getting into mischief together, but they were also sweet-natured and generous. Through it all, Nathan's love for Beatrice only deepened. They had grown together, weathered hardships and celebrated triumphs side by side. They had built something lasting, not just in the physical sense of the ranch and house, but in the family they had created and the life they shared. When Emma was 16, several young men from the surrounding ranches began paying attention to her, much to Nathan's consternation. Beatrice laughed at his protectiveness, but understood it. Their eldest daughter was beautiful and capable and kind, and it was natural that she would attract suitors. "You cannot keep her a child forever," Beatrice told him one night as they sat together after the children had gone to bed. "I know," Nathan admitted, "but it seems like just yesterday she was that little girl getting off the train, holding your hand and clutching her doll. How did she grow up so fast?" Beatrice took his hand. "Time does not stop, my love, but we have given her a good foundation. She knows what real love looks like because she has seen it in us. She knows her worth because you have told her every day of her life. She will choose well when the time comes." Nathan knew Beatrice was right, but it did not make it easier when Emma announced at 17 that she was being courted by the son of the neighboring ranch, a young man named David, who seemed decent enough. Nathan interviewed the boy sternly, making sure he understood that Emma was precious and should be treated accordingly. David passed the test, and Nathan gave them his blessing, though he still watched them like a hawk whenever David came to call. Emma and David were married when she turned 19, in the same church where Nathan and Beatrice had spoken their vows. The ceremony was beautiful, and when Nathan walked his daughter down the aisle, he thought his heart might burst with pride and bittersweet joy. Emma was starting her own life now, but she would never be far away. David's family ranch bordered theirs, and Emma had made it clear she had no intention of leaving the area. After Emma married, William at 15 took on more responsibility at the ranch, growing into a fine young man. The twins were 12 and already showing signs of being strong, independent women like their mother and sister. Beatrice and Nathan found themselves with slightly more time alone together, and they cherished it. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing Nathan had built years ago, watching the stars come out over the prairie, Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Taking us in, marrying me, taking on the responsibility of Emma when she was not yours?" Nathan turned to look at her, surprised by the question. "Never, not once. Beatrice, you and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. Every good moment in my life, every accomplishment, every bit of happiness I have known, it has all been connected to you and our family." "How could I regret that?" "I just wanted to be sure," Beatrice said. "Because I have never regretted it for a moment either. Coming here, marrying you, building this life together, It has been better than anything I could have imagined that day I got on the train in Boston." Nathan kissed her forehead. "We have been blessed, you and I, not just with the children but with each other. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I loved you plenty then." "I love you too," Beatrice replied. "You are the best man I have ever known, Nathan Pierce. You took in a woman and child who were nothing to you and made us your whole world. You never asked questions that did not need to be asked. You just loved us." "That is because you were always meant to be mine," Nathan said simply. "From the moment you stepped off that train, you and Emma both. I knew it then, even if I could not have put it into words. You were my family waiting to happen." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the prairie night. Inside the house, they could hear William playing his harmonica and the twins laughing about something. It was the sound of home, of life fully lived, of love that had taken root and flourished beyond anything either of them had dreamed possible. As the years rolled on, Nathan and Beatrice became grandparents. Emma and David had 4 children, and they were frequent visitors to the ranch. William married at 22 to a girl from town named Alice, and they settled on a piece of land Nathan deeded to them from the ranch. The twins, Sarah and Catherine, both became teachers, though Sarah eventually married and had children while Catherine remained single by choice, dedicating herself to educating the children of Concordia. Nathan and Beatrice grew older together, their hair turning gray and their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminished. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and marvel at what they had built together. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Emma, now a mother of 4 herself, stood up to make a toast. "30 years ago," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd, "my mama and I got off a train in Concordia with nothing but 2 trunks and a prayer. We were met by a man we had never seen before, a man who had every reason to turn us away. But Papa did not turn us away. He welcomed us, no questions asked. He saw us as we were and loved us anyway. Everything I am, everything good in my life started that day. So I want to raise my glass to Mama and Papa, to the best parents anyone could ask for, and to a love that has weathered every storm and only grown stronger. May we all be so lucky." Everyone raised their glasses, and Nathan felt Beatrice's hand slip into his. He looked around at all these people, this family that had grown from just the 3 of them, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Speech. Someone called out, and Nathan stood slowly, his knees not what they used to be. "I am not much for speeches," he said, his voice still strong despite his years. "But I do want to say this. 30 years ago, I was a lonely cowboy with a ranch and nothing else. I put out an advertisement for a wife, not really believing anyone would answer, certainly not believing it would work out if they did. But then Beatrice came, and she brought Emma with her, and my whole world changed. I got a wife and a daughter in one day, and then more children after that, and now grandchildren. I got a family and a reason to come home at night and someone to share my life with. That advertisement was the best thing I ever did, and marrying Beatrice was the smartest decision I ever made. Thank you, my love, for choosing me, for building this life with me, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. I love you more than words can say." Beatrice was crying, but she was smiling too, and when Nathan sat down, she kissed him in front of everyone. Their children and grandchildren cheered, and Nathan thought that this, right here, was what life was supposed to be about. Not wealth or fame or recognition, but love and family and the connections that made everything else meaningful. As the celebration continued around them, Nathan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. He thought about that day at the train station, about the little girl with dark curls who had stared at him with solemn eyes, about the woman who had been prepared to turn around and leave rather than be separated from her child. He thought about how easily it could have gone differently, how close he had come to missing out on this life. But he had not missed it. He had taken a chance on two strangers, and they had taken a chance on him, and together they had created something beautiful. He had never asked the questions that did not need to be asked, had never demanded proof or explanations, had simply opened his heart and home to people who needed them. And in return, he had been given everything. When Nathan was 65 and Beatrice was 58, they decided to officially turn over the running of the ranch to William, though they still lived in the house and helped where they could. It was time, they both agreed, for the younger generation to take over. William had proven himself more than capable, and he and Alice were raising their own children on the land now. Emma visited often with her grandchildren, and the ranch was never quiet. Nathan spent his days teaching the grandchildren to ride and telling them stories about the old days, about how their grandmother had come west and changed everything. Beatrice sewed and cooked and kept everyone in line with the same gentle efficiency she had always shown. One afternoon, Nathan and Beatrice took a ride out to the far pasture, just the two of them. They rode slowly, their bodies not as resilient as they once were, but it felt good to be on horseback together, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to build into something lasting. "Do you remember the first time I brought you out here?" Nathan asked as they sat on their horses side by side. "I remember," Beatrice said. "I remember thinking I had never seen so much open space in my life. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time." "You have always been brave," Nathan said. "Braver than you give yourself credit for. It took courage to get on that train with Emma, not knowing what you would find when you got here. It took courage to stay when people were cruel. You have always been the strongest person I know." Beatrice smiled at him. "I learned from the best. You taught me what real strength looks like, Nathan. Not the kind that demands and controls, but the kind that protects and nurtures. You taught Emma that too, and all our children. They are good people because of your example." They rode back to the house as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. As they approached the barn, they could see their family gathered on the porch, waiting for them. Children and grandchildren, all the people they loved most in the world, all of them there because two people had taken a chance on each other so many years ago. Nathan helped Beatrice down from her horse and held her for a moment before they joined the others. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Beatrice asked. "For everything. For coming here, for staying, for loving me, for giving me this life. Thank you for Emma and William and the twins and all these grandchildren. Thank you for 33 years of happiness. Thank you for being you." Beatrice cupped his face in her hands, her touch still capable of making his heart skip. "I should be thanking you. You saved us, Nathan. Emma and me, we were lost, and you gave us a home. You gave us family and safety and love. Everything good in our lives started with you." "No," Nathan said firmly. "It started with us, together. And it has been an adventure, has it not? The best kind," Beatrice agreed. They walked up to the porch hand in hand, ready to spend the evening surrounded by the family they had built together. As Nathan sat in his rocking chair with a grandchild on his lap and another leaning against his knee, as he watched Beatrice laugh at something Emma said, and saw William horsing around with his sons, he felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what he had been missing all those years ago. Not just companionship, though that was part of it. Not just help with the ranch, though that had been welcome. But this sense of belonging, of being part of something larger than himself, of love that extended out in all directions and came back multiplied. He had found his place in the world, his purpose, and it was right here with these people. Nathan Pierce lived to be 73 years old, surrounded by family until the very end. When he passed peacefully in his sleep one winter night, he left behind a legacy not of wealth or power, but of love. He left a ranch that had prospered under his care, children and grandchildren who carried his values, and a wife who had been his partner in love for 41 years. At his funeral, Emma stood to speak, now a grandmother herself with silver threading through her dark hair. Her voice was strong and clear as she addressed the packed church. "My father was not a perfect man," she said, "but he was a good man, perhaps the best man I have ever known. When I was just a small child, frightened and uncertain, he looked at me with kindness instead of judgment. He never asked questions about where I came from or why I looked different from my mother. He simply loved me from that very first day, as if I had always been his. He taught me that family is not about blood, but about choice and commitment and showing up every single day. He taught me how to ride and rope and run a ranch, but more importantly, he taught me how to be a good human being. He taught all of us that. The world is darker without him in it, but his light continues in all of us who loved him and were loved by him." Beatrice, now 71 and leaning on a cane, stood beside Emma throughout the service. She had known this day would come eventually, but that did not make it easier. Nathan had been her companion, her love, her partner in all things for most of her adult life. The house felt empty without him, even though it was still full of family. But Beatrice was made of stern stuff, as Nathan had always known. She continued on, helping William with the ranch, playing with her great-grandchildren, sewing and cooking and living. She spoke often of Nathan, keeping his memory alive for the youngest generation who would never know him personally, but would know of him through her stories. When Beatrice passed 5 years later, quiet and peaceful like Nathan had, she was buried beside him in the Concordia Cemetery. Their headstone was simple but meaningful. Nathan and Beatrice Pierce, beloved parents and grandparents, together always. Emma and William and their families continued to work the ranch that Nathan had built and that Beatrice had helped make into a home. The story of how Nathan and Beatrice met, of the lonely cowboy who did not ask questions when his mail-order bride arrived with a child, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And in a way, Nathan and Beatrice lived on, not just in the memories of those who had known them, but in the values they had instilled and the love they had created. They had proven that family was what you made it, that love was a choice renewed daily, and that sometimes the best things in life came from taking a chance on someone who needed you as much as you needed them. The ranch still stands today, run by the descendants of Nathan and Beatrice Pierce, a testament to two people who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that lasted far beyond their own lives. And if you visit on a quiet evening, when the wind blows across the prairie and the sun sets in a blaze of color, some say you can still feel their presence, still sense the love that transformed a lonely house into a home full of laughter and life. That telegram in April of 1882 had changed everything, just as Nathan had known it would. But it had changed things for the better, in ways neither he nor Beatrice could have predicted. They had both been looking for something they could not quite name, and they had found it in each other and in the family they built together. It was a love story that started with practicality and grew into something transcendent, proof that the best endings often come from the most unexpected beginnings. And so their story ends not with sadness, but with joy. Joy for a life well lived, for love deeply felt, for children raised and grandchildren cherished. Joy for the courage it took to step off a train into the unknown and the kindness it took to welcome strangers as family. Joy for every sunrise they watched together, every meal they shared, every moment of connection and understanding that made their partnership something special. Nathan Pierce took a chance on a mail-order bride who came with a child everyone said was not hers. He did not ask questions because the answers did not matter. What mattered was the here and now, the choice to love and be loved, the decision to build a family based on something stronger than blood. And in making that choice, he found everything he had been searching for and more than he had ever dreamed possible. That is how love works sometimes, quietly and simply, without fanfare or drama. Two people meet, choose each other, and create something lasting. It is not always easy, and it does not always look the way we expect it to, but when it is real and true and deep, it changes everything. Nathan and Beatrice knew that truth, lived it every day, and passed it down to their children and grandchildren as the most precious inheritance of all. Their love story, beginning with that telegram and that meeting at the train station, continuing through decades of partnership and ending only when death separated them, remained the foundation of a family that grew and flourished across generations. It was a testament to the power of acceptance, the strength of commitment, and the transformative nature of love freely given and gratefully received. And though Nathan and Beatrice are long gone, their legacy lives on in the land they worked, the children they raised, and the love they proved was possible when you were brave enough to take a chance on someone who needed you, and wise enough to let yourself be needed in return.